Hi, my name is Tony Foster, and I'm an alcoholic. Today I'm going to talk to you about Step 2. If you've watched my previous videos, you know that in the first video we went over all 12 steps just briefly, and then we're going to break down every step far more in depth as we go along. Last time we did Step 1, today we're going to do Step 2. But if this is your first time watching my videos, you might be saying, oh, what does this joker know about the steps? What makes him qualified to do this? Well, I don't consider myself an expert, but I have been sober almost 21 years. I also have run several treatment centers, and I have a PhD in counseling and a master's in mental health and rehab counseling. So I think I'm a little bit qualified, primarily though, through the fact that I've taken over 100 people through the steps. I've been through the steps as a sponsee myself on at least 4 occasions, and I've presented the steps at many AA meetings as well as some conferences, and when I was a adjunct professor at Florida Atlantic University, I talked about the steps a lot there and broke them down for people who were becoming therapists who were specializing in substance abuse. So that's a little bit about my background. So now let's talk about the steps. In Step 1, we talked about the fact that we're powerless over alcohol and that our lives are unmanageable. In Step 2, we're going to talk about that we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. Step 2 was a very tough step for me the first time I went through the steps. Talking about a power greater than myself was very difficult because, frankly, I had significant ego problems. And as you go through all of my videos, you're going to see that ego is a big part of my problem. So agreeing that there was a power greater than myself was difficult. But bigger than that, significantly bigger than that, and really the biggest problem with my whole ability to do Step 2 and really to move on from Step 2 was my inability to accept that I was insane. Now, if you're an alcoholic watching this, or you're the family member of an alcoholic and you've seen their behavior or you've seen your behavior if you're the alcoholic, I think if you're talking from a sober perspective, you might have a good understanding about the insanity of it. I wasn't looking at it from my behavior. I was looking at it from, am I insane? Am I clinically insane? And, you know, the fact of the matter was, now looking back, even after a couple of years, looking back, I was definitely insane. The fact that I would try to quit drinking and pick up another drink after I knew where that was going to take me showed how insane I was over and over and over again. But the real thing that got me over the top, believing that I was insane when I was drinking, was I was in a meeting once and we were reading stories out of the back of the big book. And the story that came to mind was on page 544, which was freedom from bondage. And I'm going to go over that right now. So most of my 12 steps will come out of the 12 and 12, but this part of it I think is very important for you to know about because the stories are very helpful, and this helped me quite a bit. So in Freedom from Bondage, if you go, it starts on 544, but if you go to page 550, you're going to see that in the main paragraph in the middle, I'm going to read a big part of it so that you could see what I mean. I had no problem admitting I was powerless over alcohol, and I certainly agreed that my life had become unmanageable. I had only to reflect on the contrast between the plans I made so many years ago for my life with what really happened to know I couldn't manage my life drunk or sober. AA taught me that willingness to believe was enough for a beginning. It's been true in my case, nor could I quarrel with restore us to sanity. For my actions, drunk or sober, before AA were not those of a sane person. My desire to be honest with myself made it necessary for me to realize that my thinking was irrational. It had to be, or I could not have justified my erratic behavior as I did. And here's the important part. I've been benefited from a dictionary definition I found that reads, rationalization is giving a socially acceptable reason for socially unacceptable behavior. And socially unacceptable behavior is a form of insanity. Well, I could rationalize anything. I think many people in early recovery or when they're still drinking or using are very good at rationalizing. And my behavior as a sober person looking back was socially unacceptable in many cases. So this really helped me. So rationalization is giving a socially acceptable reason for socially unacceptable behavior, and socially unacceptable behavior is a form of insanity. That I could believe in. That I bought hook, line, and sinker, and I could go on. But that's just my personal journey. So now let's talk about what the 12 and 12 has to say about it, okay? So step 2 starts on page 25, and I'm going to use my glasses again. And again it says, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And I'm going to read some of the highlights here and give you some background on each of the highlights I talk about. In the very first paragraph, the writer talks about step 2 and how people look at step 2 at times. The moment they read step 2, most AA newcomers are confronted with a dilemma, sometimes a serious one. How often have we heard them cry out, look what you people have done to us. You've convinced us that we're alcoholics and that our lives are unmanageable. Having reduced us to a state of absolute helplessness, you now declare that none but a higher power can remove our obsession. Some of us won't believe in God. Others can't, and still others who do believe that God exists have no faith whatever that he will perform this miracle. I fell into the category of won't believe in God, refuse to believe in God. It was my belief that we were each our own God. That was my ego talking. Again, my ego's a big problem for me. The next paragraph starts with, let's look first at the case of the one who says he won't believe, the belligerent one. That's me. He's in a state of mind which can be described only as savage. His whole philosophy of life, in which he so gloried, is threatened. That was part of my problem. Everything I'd ever spoken about was threatened by having to believe in a power greater than myself, no matter what it was. That was part of my belligerentness. So if you turn to page 26, then the book gets into what the response is from other AAs to someone trying to go through step 2. His sponsor probably says, take it easy. The hoop you have to jump through is a lot wider than you think. Please, please, please understand, I don't need you to believe in my God. I need you to believe in your version of God, whatever that might be. I don't care if it's the AA group. I don't care if it's someone you admire. It could be nature. If you held a gun to my head and asked me what my higher power was, I really couldn't describe it. I just know it's not me. And that's really important to me. So going on to the second paragraph, well, says the newcomer, I know you're telling me the truth. It's no doubt a fact that AA is full of people who once believed as I do. But just how in these circumstances does a fellow take it easy? That's what I want to know. So the 12 and 12 goes on to tell us that AA only asks us to do 3 things and makes these 3 statements. Alcoholics Anonymous does not demand that you believe anything. All of its 12 steps are but suggestions. Second, to get sober and to stay sober, you don't have to swallow all of step 2 right now. Looking back, I find that I took it piecemeal myself. And third, all you really need is a truly open mind. When I was going through the steps, I was told the principle of the first step was honesty, the principle of the second step was open mind. And the first 3 steps were so important that you needed to remember honesty, open mind, and then we'll talk about the 3rd step next time. So just resign yourself from the debating society and quit bothering yourself with such deep questions as whether it was the hen or the egg that came first. Again, I said, all you need is an open mind. I came to have a philosophy about a lot of these things in life that are meaningful in the big picture, but in the minutia are not meaningful. And I came to realize, who cares? Just believe in something bigger than yourself. I don't have to argue every single little point. And this is the beginning of me letting go of my ego. Who cares if I'm right or you're right or somebody else is right? I just want to get sober. And I was desperate enough to have an open mind. Don't forget the gift of desperation. It's a gift. Don't give it up. It's a gift. It caused me to believe in a higher power at a time where I had never believed in a higher power my entire life. Okay? So then we go on to page 27, the first full paragraph. The minute I stopped arguing, I could begin to see and feel. Right there, step 2, gently and very gradually began to infiltrate my life. To acquire it, I only had to stop fighting and practice the rest of the AA's program as enthusiastically as I could. It was about this time, as I was following directions and doing the things I was told and giving away my ego, didn't need it, that I started to see life a little bit differently. I started to feel like the grass was greener, the sky was bluer, and I could hear birds. Now, some of you out there may be saying, this is just BS. That's the way it happened for me. I just had a clarity that I had never had before, and I couldn't deny that I was starting to feel better. Right at step 2. So further on page 27, you can, if you wish, make AA itself your higher power. Here's a very large group of people who have solved their alcohol problem. In this respect, there's certainly a power greater than you who have not even come close to a solution. Surely you can have faith in them. Even this minimum of faith will be enough. You will find many members who have crossed the threshold just this way. All of them will tell you that once across, their faith broadened and deepened. Relieved of the alcohol obsession, their lives unaccountably transformed. They came to believe in a higher power, and most of them began to talk of God. See, we evolve. The more we do the steps, the more we go to meetings, the more we work with our sponsor, and ultimately we sponsor people, we evolve. And so today, for me, and this occurred maybe 3 years in, I stopped talking as much about my higher power as I talk about God and my relationship with God. But that's not for you in the early stages, possibly, because that will come as you get more sober, more into it, more into the meetings, more into doing things like service for the still suffering alcoholic. You're going to come to see a higher power working in your life and working in other people's lives. So moving on to page 31, there is a huge paragraph at the beginning, and I'm going to read the entire thing because it's a very important paragraph. As psychiatrists have often observed, defiance is the outstanding characteristic of many an alcoholic. Defiance is an outstanding characteristic of many an alcoholic. Are you defiant? Once again, ego. I still can be defiant at times. I thought it was a positive trait for me, but it turned out not to be. I found that out about a lot of my personality traits that I thought were good, but they weren't. Defiance. Defiance is part of the 3 Ds, right? That many alcoholics have. Denial, defiance, and delusion. Does that apply to you? It applied to me. So let's go on. It's not strange that lots of us have had our day at defying God himself. Sometimes it's because God has not delivered us the good things of life which we specified, as a greedy child makes an impossible list for Santa Claus. More often, though, we had met up with some major calamity, and to our way of thinking, lost out because God deserted us. The girl we wanted to marry had other notions. We prayed God that she'd change her mind, but she didn't. We prayed for healthy children, and we were presented with sick ones, or none at all. We prayed for promotions at business, and none came. Loved ones upon whom we heartily depended were taken from us by so-called acts of God. Then we became drunkards and asked God to stop that, but nothing happened. This was the unkindest cut of all. Damn this faith business, we said. When we encountered AA, the fallacy of our defiance was revealed. At no time had we asked what God's will was for us. Instead, we'd been telling Him what it ought to be. So belief means reliance, not defiance. That's what we talk about a lot more in step 3, because in step 3, we're not looking at our will, we're looking at our higher power's will. So as we begin to close in step 2, we go to page 32, and down towards the bottom of the page, we get into the fact was we really hadn't cleaned house so that the grace of God could enter us and expel the obsession. In no deep or meaningful sense had we ever taken stock of ourselves, made amends to those we had harmed, or freely given to any other human being without any demand for reward. We always wanted ours, and probably we wanted theirs too, especially when it came to alcohol. Few indeed are the practicing alcoholics who have any idea how irrational they are, or seeing their irrationality can bear to face it. In the 12 and 12 it says, sanity is defined as soundness of mind, yet no alcoholic, soberly analyzing his destructive behavior, whether the destruction fell on the dining room furniture or his own moral fiber, can claim soundness of mind for himself. Therefore, step 2 is the rallying point for all of us. Whether agnostic, atheist, or former believer, we can stand together on this step. True humility and an open mind can lead us to faith, and every AA meeting is an assurance that God will restore us to sanity if we rightly relate ourselves to Him. So remember that the principle in step 2 is to have an open mind and stop fighting. We don't have to be right on every issue. Don't become a doormat. I'm not saying that. But you don't have to fight every issue. Especially this one. This one's too big. So come to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore you to sanity. Thank you. And we'll see you next time on step 3.